Okay, so we were recording the session. The session today is a little bit unusual. We normally, as Newcomen Society, have meetings in regions, and the Western region meet in Bristol. The Bristol Industrial Archaeological Society, as the name suggests, also meet near Bristol in Cambridgeshire. So there's a lot of overlap, and a lot of overlap with the membership as well. Historically, the two groups have worked together very well and shared things. So we've always had a shared meeting where we do talks. Usually they're very short talks, 15 minutes each or so. That usually means we run out and people are saying, "Oh, I'd like to hear more about that." Sometimes that's followed up with a full talk. The way we're doing it today is we're going to do two short talks, both of about half an hour or so each. And the theme is other talks. They're not full talks, they're only short talks, but the other really comes from the subject matter. Other because Geoff Wallis, bias member and Newcomen Society member, former president as well. Both societies. Most people will know Geoff, so I won't give him too long an introduction, but I know there's people online who won't know Geoff. Founder member of Dorothea Restorations, a long time industrial architect as well, specialist in all sorts of things, engineering and metal wise. He's going to do a talk on Brunel's other bridge. So the other is not the suspension bridge, it's the other Bristol Brunel bridge. So that's what he's going to talk about. And then when we finish Geoff's chunk, I'm going to do a talk on the other pumping station for the Severn Tunnel, because there was a pumping station most people will know over on the Welsh side. People are very familiar with that one. But there was one on the English side as well. Technically speaking, they're both on the English side, but we'll come to that later on. What we'll do is we'll talk a very brief thing on that one as well. It's only a short talk because there's not an awful lot of information about that one. So both talks are kind of other things, and they both have a theme of conservation in them as well. So with that introduction, I'll hand over to Geoff. Let me get this. I'm gonna which one's actually speaking, which one's muted. Mute that. Mute this one. Right. Can people hear me still? Can somebody wave if they can still hear me?
Yes.
Where are people? Somebody with a camera on. I can't see. Could somebody turn the camera on and wave at me a moment, just to make sure?
Yes, we can hear.
Thumbs up would be good. Yeah, there's a thumbs up from Julian. Thank you very much. Okay, so we are online and people can hear me. Okay, Geoff, I'll hand over to you. Okay. That's what people online can see.
Okay, so
that's
okay. Thanks very much, David, and congratulations on wrestling 2 laptops into submission. At least I hope you have. I'm not sure we would know here if you can't hear us all over the country, but welcome to those who are not here in Bristol, and thank you for the invitation to give a brief presentation tonight about the heritage assets in Bristol Western Harbour. Now, for those who are not from Bristol, I'm going to just very briefly outline the history of our amazing docks here. An impossible task because it's a long history, but what you're looking at the moment is the end of, that is the west end, the entrance to the floating harbour, as it's called. If you had a ship in the 18th century, you would come up the Avon from the Severn estuary quite fast on the rising tide, and into the city centre on the River Avon. And you'd have to get to a quay pretty quickly because the tide would be going out very soon. And in the Severn estuary, the range is about 14 meters. It's the second highest in the world. And so you don't have very much time. You've got very fast and high tides. And when your ship was in the harbour, in the River Avon, really, in the city centre, you would have to make sure that you were careful where you positioned it, make sure your cargo was tied down, your ship in fact was ship shape and Bristol fashion, or you'd end up with lost cargo or damaged ship. Now, that's not great when you've got ports in other parts of the country competing with you. Bristol had to do something better than that. So to cut the story short, by the early 1800s, the floating harbour had been contained. In other words, the River Avon had been cut off, more or less at the point that you see on this photograph, to the design of William Jessup. And you're looking at two entrance locks. One of the original ones, Jessup's, is on the left there. I operate a...
Yeah.
Yes, there we are. Look at that.
No, it's not on the screen. That's
no, I'm afraid the screen's not showing. Okay, on the left is Jessup's original lock, but of course shipping went on getting bigger, and so on the right you'll see an improved wider lock by Brunel from the 1840s, and that was a considerable improvement. The floating harbour, as it's called, kept the ships floating at all stages of the tide. I'm not indexing on here. There we go. And of course, shipping continued to increase in size, particularly in length. And very soon we needed a bigger entrance lock. So what you're looking at on the left there is the new entrance lock created in the early 1870s by the city engineer Howard. And you'll notice that the lock is not only bigger, but it's aiming more down the river, if I can put it that way. It's at a much better angle for these larger ships to get out of the Cumberland Basin, which you see in the center of the photograph there, into the River Avon, bottom left. And that has replaced Jessup's North Lock. And you can see, still on the right, Brunel's Lock, now closed off partway down. So, of course, the industry now in the city harbour has pretty much completely gone. The commercial industry. There used to be a lot of imports of coal and timber, and of course, fine wines and tobacco and so forth. There is just one industry left active in the area now, and it's actually a rather fine one. It's Thomas Ware's tanners, which have been tanning fine leather since the 1840s. They don't actually make a product, they tan the leather, but these are the products you can see illustrated that are created, and they sell worldwide. This is a very well-established business, a very entrepreneurial managing director. It's the largest traditional pit tanners of leather in the UK, and it's still active within, I suppose, 1 mile of the commercial city centre, in an area that you'll see later is ripe for development. The hides are, as traditionally, always tanned for at least a year and a day, and they still use the oak bark tannin, as you can see there. Quite wonderful. It ought to be a tourist attraction, but it's great. There's a great difficulty in getting in for obvious reasons. My concern is that this one day will be, well, will become firstly known about, and secondly, a lot of pressure to redevelop it. You might imagine that at the ingoing end of this system is raw cow and other animal hides, which is not exactly compatible with fine housing, which is being built right next door now. So there are increasing pressures on this site. Nevertheless, it's survived so far. We also have a rather fine electrical substation from 1905, constructed to Hennebeek's design, reinforced concrete, one of the earliest. I think it is the earliest in Bristol, one of the earliest in the country. It was built to supply 360 volts, which is Bristol voltage, for the electrical systems in Underful Yard that powered the hydraulic system. It still does that today, but from a transformer. It used to have rotary converters in it, as you can see there in that photograph. We have probably more than our fair share of bonded tobacco warehouses. Of course, Bristol was famous for its Will's tobacco factory. This is Warehouse A, 1902, built by Cowlands. This is Warehouse B, 1908. These are all Edmond Coignier's reinforced concrete system, all grade 2 listed, and this one is tobacco bonded warehouse C, which is a storage area now. Jessop's lock going from the floating harbour into the Cumberland Basin is still there. It's the only one of Jessop's locks now that survives, as you can see top left there, and nearby there's some rather fine dock workers' cottages, all grade 2 listed. The junction lock is actually now listed. It wasn't for some time. And the swivel bridge over it is locally made, 1925, made by Lysart's Bristol Steelworks, and still rotating. It's a fine bridge. Brunel's south entrance lock, that was the one I showed you in that first photograph on the right. That's what it looks like from upstream, or rather it did look like that until about 12 years ago. It was designed to have caisson gates, and you can see on the left there's a big recess in the wall where the huge hinged caisson gates used to go back into the wall so that the ships going through the lock would not catch it. I don't think you can see this online, but I'm pointing to the folk here in Bristol to a little hinge on the wall there. Now that little hinge is 9 inches in diameter. It's a peg hinge, and there's another one further down. Wonderful, just a great big door, really, partially submerged. It's a floating caisson and closed against this rebate here. Now, when they closed it off, you remember that first photograph I showed you? It showed a barrier midway along the lock, and this is the barrier as it was built. You can see that it has 4 hydraulically operated sluice gates. This is water hydraulic operated, pipes coming down from under full yard. The hydraulic system actually is still working at under full yard, although not delivering power to anywhere. And of course, you needed so much water flushing through the floating harbour, because if you recall, this is the impounded River Avon, and the silt is still coming down that route. And it's got to either settle out in the docks and cause no end of trouble, which it did, or it's got to be allowed to go on through and downstream, down the River Avon to the estuary. And so this was what was designed. Oops, I'm sorry. Let's go back there. This was the design to allow a jolly good flow from the Cumberland Basin through the closed off Brunel Lock and on then down the River Avon to the River Severn. Now, the hydraulic system in Bristol closed in the mid-century, mid-last century, about 1955, I think, or 60. And so these hydraulic rams would never be working, and they were modernized, or rather one of them was modernized. The one on the left that you see there was turned into an electro-hydraulic system to allow the water still to flood through, to just keep the water in the Cumberland Basin sweet and clear of silt. Unfortunately, about 10 years ago, the electrics failed. It was going to cost £20,000 to put it right, which a city of our size couldn't afford. And so there we are. That's what it looks like now. There's about 25 feet of silt in it. You look at the bottom left there, you'll see the mechanism. It was a relatively straightforward electro-hydraulic ram for lifting the sluice gate. A great shame, because now we can't see that fantastic masonry work. Nevertheless, I'm hopeful that we might be able to find enough money to get that sluice gate working again, and the dividend would be fantastic to be able to see this rather wonderful masonry work going back to the 1840s. Over that lock is a replica bridge. That's from 1873, from Howard's time, a copy of Brunel's bridge, which we'll talk about in a minute. That was a swivel bridge, but it's now stationary and unfortunately has been truncated at its tail end. That is Howard's Lock from 1873, still very much in use, in good condition and unlisted. For reasons that I've not been able to establish, the operational equipment in Bristol City Docks is not listed. And I think that's because the council don't want to be in a position of having to give themselves listed building consent to carry out work to their own property. But that might be a slightly cynical attitude. Nevertheless, again, floating caisson gates, as you can see bottom left there, still very much in use and very fine. We also have the dock office at the entrance, and to the right, listing slightly, the toll booth, and the little green lean-to has in it the remnants of a tide gauge. It's all still there, and the whole lot is unlisted. And even though there was a review of the listing last year, it was declared, none of it was declared to be of sufficient interest, architecturally or historically. Of course, there are other structures of the 1870s that look like that, apparently. A shame of that, I think. They are unique to Bristol. They might not be unique to the country, but we have only one set. We've got all sorts of rather wonderful dock furniture. We have electric capstans. We have hydraulic capstans. Of course, no hydraulic system now. But if you look underneath that hydraulic capstan that you see on the left there, you will see on the right a 3-throw water hydraulic motor. Wonderful. We have several sets. We also have Stodderton Pit electric capstans. And there's a lot of these iron covers all over the tongue, as it's called, the entrance area. And underneath are pits which contain all sorts of wonderful hydraulic equipment. These are hydraulic jiggers that you see on the right, which are rams that have multiple falls of chains on them to increase the length of chain that is pulled. And those were used for both lifting the paddles to allow the water to go through and to open and close the lock gate. So every lock gate had to have one to pull it open and one to pull it closed. And of course, there were 2 gates per end of the lock. So there's quite a lot of these, and a number of them survive. We don't know exactly how many because the harbour master is not, well, he's rather coy about letting us lift his covers and see what's underneath. We have ways of peering through small holes and finding out what's underneath. Some of it's in remarkably good condition, given that these are pits underground that are subject to seawater flooding. The whole of this area floods up to the quay level. It's quite serious, and it's getting worse, of course. More of that later if you're interested. So this is Brunel's Swivel Bridge from 1849, which originally was built to go across his lock. But when that lock was superseded by the bigger one that I showed you, Howard's Lock, in 1873, this bridge was moved to that lock, or the entrance to the lock anyway, and it was shortened a little bit, but it was so successful that it carried on in use till the mid-1960s, when the Plimsoll Bridge, which is the big one that we use nowadays, and you can just see in that photograph over the top of the older bridge, that was built, and this became redundant and was abandoned, which was a great shame. In fact, it was nearly cut up, but the harbour master at the time thought, well, I better just do a bit of research on this before I cut it up, find out at least what the material's made of. Well, it might have been by Brunel. And after quite a lot of research, there were 3 bridges like this in Bristol. It was very confusing trying to find out the exact history of this one. It was verified, authenticated by David Greenfield, the structural engineer, as being Brunel's bridge. And a very fine one it is. You can see bottom right, the section shows that the tubes at the top, which of course are carrying the cantilevered end at the far end of this picture, those have tie rods inside them, which are tensioned. So this is if you like, a post-tensioned structure, undoubtedly the first of its type in this country. And still, one side still has tension in the tie rods and the other doesn't. So now the whole thing wallows rather. And the reason the one side is not now tensioned is of course a ship ran into it. So it is in rather poor condition now after 50 years. What we're looking at there is the central box section. There's a series of boxes. There's an octagonal box and a cross, if you like, in the center, and that's carrying 75 tons. And underneath it is a series of wheels, just 4 wheels and a turntable ring. And you can see it's really in rather poor condition. There is a danger that it would collapse eventually. And so we've taken steps to try and preserve it. We started off by doing a lot of archival research. We've done investigations on the site. As you can see, we've peered into every corner. We've drilled holes to find out what the foundations are like, and discovered that actually this was built on top of Jessop's old lock. So if you remember, if you think this was moved to this site in 1872-ish, when the new lock, Howard's lock, was being built. Well, if you were excavating a lock, what would you do with the silt, the spoil? You would simply tip it into any other lock that was nearby, and that's what happened. So this whole 75-ton construction is on sort of compressed alluvium, which is surprisingly stable. And to try and buy time, this is clearly a long-term project. We were quite worried about the central area that I illustrated in just now. The cantilever part is on the right, but in the of the top photograph, and the pivoting part, the turntable, is on the left, and we've put what we call a chicken shed, a roof over the top, just to try and preserve it. And we've done a lot of painting and so forth. Fortunately, we have a small volunteer who could get into the 9-inch wide box spaces.
Need a small volunteer.
Unfortunately, he's grown up now. So, in fact, there he is. He's now at Plymouth University. He's been with us for 10 years. But we have now got the bridge turning again. We've done a lot of work to the turntable, including the replacing some of the bearings, which you see top right. And notice these bearings, of course, they're bronze shells, but they're, to Brunel's rather extraordinary design, they're double conical, and we have no idea why. It's a real pain. Everyone else would make them cylindrical, but this increases the complexity vastly. But nevertheless, it works. We've been trying to raise the profile of this whole project. We've got 400 supporters now on our database. We have monthly work days for volunteers, and numbers seem to maintain very well. And by the way, next Saturday, there's a volunteers work day, so do please bring your overalls along. We've been, well, we had a 170th anniversary celebration in 2019, which was very well attended by the public, and we had, I think, 6 interviews from the local media and so forth. We had a 2-day celebration, the second day being a conference organised by the Institution of Structural Engineers. And of course, we are open for doors open days. We've published some of our research and other information on 3 papers in the Newcomen Society journal. It's all been recorded by video, and of course, social media is a great part of our life as well. So much about the heritage assets then. Let's just move on to the sort of politics and what's going to happen, what has been happening recently and what is likely to happen in the future. Now, we're looking at a plan of the conservation, or rather the character areas in Bristol City docks. And all of that area you see there, except the red one to the left on the west, have been developed or are being developed. There are well-developed plans, and much of it has already been delivered. So all that's left is that difficult bit on the left-hand end there, where there's a lot of roads and rivers, or waterways rather, which is difficult from everybody's point of view, certainly from the planning point of view. And it was that area, the red one, that has been now called the Western Harbour. And in May 2016, our newly elected mayor, Marvin Rees, declared his intention to create a city of hope built on ambition, inclusion, and social justice. Excellent ideas. And he focused very much on that western end of the harbour. Actually, he was the first mayor of a European city who was black. And he's been a very capable person, in my view, a high level of integrity, and has tried very hard to deliver what he said there. In 2019, he proposed a scheme for that Western Harbour area that would include 2,500 new homes with offices, student accommodation, retail, and leisure. Now, you might recall that it's already full of waterways and roads. So that was quite an ambition. He apparently sought funding from the Far East and had some success in that. It went public, and there was frankly quite a lot of outcry from the public in Bristol, certainly local people. Why were we not consulted, and what's happening here, and what about the flooding, and what about our road schemes and all the rest of it? Then COVID came upon us, and the whole thing quietened down. And by March 2022, this had become a properly established idea, if you like, set out in a vision for Western Harbour, presented by the council, that is, adopted by the councillors rather than only the mayor's initiative. And that went out to public consultation and became part of the dialogue about the development of the city. Then in May of that year, there was a referendum that decided that the mayor was to be abolished. In January 2024,
The mayor was going to be abolished, or
well,
the post of mayor.
does it make any difference? The position of mayor was going to be abolished, and so the mayor was honoured this year in the New Year's honoured list with an OBE, and his term ends in May this year. And I do hope that he has opportunity to serve us in Bristol again in the future. I suspect he will become an MP. But it does mean now that the decisions on this rather difficult area are going to be made by committees. And I'm not sure how successful. Oh, how did that get in there? Sorry. I better not say anything about committees designing horses. That is the area, and you can see that there is a statutory waterway running through there. That's the one at the top, and the River Avon's new route, that is the new cut as it's called, running along the bottom there and curving northwards, together with roads coming in from the north, south, and from the city on the east. So, and the whole of that area is, or most of that area is subject to flooding now, and that's going to get worse. And the plan is to put 2,500 houses in there, together with leisure space, retail, and so forth. So that is a very big challenge. Now, you'll see a note at the top right there. Just out of the picture is where the SS Great Britain was manufactured, and is now docked, displayed in its original Great Western Dockyard. And next to that is another dockyard called the Albion Dock. And that has been taken on by the SS Great Britain. And their plan, announced some years ago, is as shown here. On the right, you can see, sorry, let's start on the left, you can see the SS Great Britain in its dock. And on the right is the larger Albion Dock, part of which is now used as a commercial repair facility for ships. But we can't get ships in to the city harbour of the size that will completely fill that dockyard. So the plan that the SS Great Britain have is to divide the dock in half and build a full-scale replica of Brunel's first ship, the Great Western, at the far end, as you can see. Continue to use the other end for commercial dock, dry docking for ships. And to the bottom right, you'll see the Brunel Swivel Bridge over the entrance. So the plan was to move this rather derelict and heavy and flexible bridge to Albion Dockyard and display it there. Now that had some advantages. It would be like it happened fairly quickly. The SS Great Britain are rather good at capturing money and making things happen, and they would look after it. They would do a good job of conservation and they would maintain it. The downside is that it would be extremely expensive, it would be out of context, and it would be quite a risky thing to do. So I'm just going to run through what happened last year. In the spring, Historic England relisted everything, all the historic items in the Western Harbour development. And that's partly because they could see a development coming, and partly because they could see this bridge might be moving elsewhere. So they gave the Brunel Lock, the Swivel Bridge, and the replica bridge over it what they call group listing. In other words, it has group significance. In other words, please don't take one item out and put it in the Albion Dockyard. Summer of last year, that plan that I showed you there went public, and they declared their intention to put it in for listed building consent. So in response to that, one of our volunteers started a petition on Bristol City's own website to ask the City Council not to allow it to be moved, but to preserve it in situ. That became very popular and in fact became the largest live petition last year. Then suddenly at the 1st of September, the CEO of the Great Britain Trust announced his retirement with almost immediate effect. English Heritage wrote a letter to the SS Great Britain giving a lot of reasons, very clearly worded reasons for not moving the bridge. And that resulted in November, the Great Britain announcing that they weren't going to move the bridge. And then subsequently, they put in their planning application for Albion Dockyard without it. And this may not be connected, but I heard then that there's a new chair being appointed at the SS Great Britain at the end of this year. So a lot happened last year. And I have to say, I think that the work of the volunteers and the views of people like yourselves, the heritage specialists, have made a difference in this case. So what's happening now? Well, the whole of that area is subject to master planning, as they call it. And the liaison, the consultation, if you like, with the stakeholders, the people like our group, I suppose, and the residents and so forth, is going to be via a stakeholders forum. And that is being set up right now, and we're hopeful of being invited to join it. We have applied. We have also now just started an engineering consultancy paid for by Historic England. And this is a rather innovative scheme, which is using modern technology. Have we got time to do this video? Do you think I've got one?
Very
5 minutes.
Sorry?
Quickly. Yeah, okay. They're using a rather innovative technique where they shake the whole bridge, and a lot of transducers measure the acceleration of different points, and they can then work out the flexibility of the bridge and what needs to be done to repair patches. But I'll show you a video of that just now. So just very briefly to finish off with, what we're doing now is trying to get agreement on what the policy is for the treatment of all the heritage assets in the Western Harbour area, not just the bridge. And it's to be supportive of the Western Harbour master planning process. We're not trying to fight them in any way. We are on their side, provided they do the right things, you know, in terms of conservation. That might sound a little bit cack-handed, but we have a clear view of what we want to do, and we think that policy is right and it's justified and it's in line with historic English heritage policy and all that. And we have it's our task to work with the council to convince them that that's what they should be doing.
Directive leadership.
Is it good? And what we're trying to do is get them to firstly stabilize the condition of the assets, restore them to a condition in which they can best serve the Western Harbour development. What about perhaps getting a swivel bridge working again so it can act as a bridge, a low-level crossing, which is very necessary, and then provide provision for long-term care and maintenance. So please encourage your organisation to sign up to this policy document, follow what we're doing online, and if you'd like to just let me have your email address, I'll send you newsletters, and come and join us on Saturday. Now, could we get online and just have a look at two very short videos?
I just stop sharing that screen room.
Would you folks be interested to see two short videos? One of them of this vibrating process going on, and the other one I'll explain just before we run it.
So if I just go.
My answer would be yes, please, Geoff.
Just stop that moment.
Are there any questions from the room whilst David's doing his wonders here?
Share screen. That one. Share. No, that's the problem.
Videos.
That's a question over there.
Sorry. Yep.
Is vibration technique applicable to cast iron structures?
The short answer is probably. Let me just explain a little bit about it. The bridge has got about 50 fairly serious rust holes in it, and maybe a couple of hundred rather more minor defects, which are regarded as non-structural. In other words, wasting of plates and loose rivets and things like that. The challenge is to work out which is which. So it's important to model the bridge with you know, a mathematical model, which is relatively easy to do, and you can mark on all the different defects. So actually put on all the rust holes and so forth. And then you can use mathematics, of course, to see what the strength is of each part and how much work you need to do to repair everything, to make it structurally sound and up to a certain standard. The problem is verifying that model, and that's what this does. It enables the structure to be vibrated, and they can tie back to see whether the match is good. And apparently it is fairly good so far. So this is the video there, David. Yep. Okay, you can see there's a vibrator there. That's about 70 kilograms, vibrating at a speed away from the natural frequency of the bridge. And elsewhere, all over the structure are little accelerometers glued on, literally glued on or held on with little magnets, which then, which are connected back to a laptop, and we'll see that in a minute, hopefully. Now, you'll know that if you can measure acceleration, you can easily work out from that the velocity, and from that you can work out the displacement. So each of these points can be verified. The displacement under a known agitating load, as it were, can be calculated, or rather measured. And then that measurement compared with the predictions by the mathematical model. And so there's some confidence that the theory and practice do tie up. Not working?
Doesn't appear to be. It says it's
The
playing.
blue container you see there is a water ballast. So they first did this with the bridge as found. Let's go on to the other one then. Just hold that. Just don't run it for them. Just hold it. And then they put some water ballast on it. Then they propped up the jib end of the bridge and did the vibrations again to get it in different sorts of modes to test the model again, which was done very quickly in one very wet day on site. The other, I'm just going to show you now, hopefully a little bit more successfully. We had a visit from a volunteer, a young man who came to the site and said, what are you doing? And after we'd explained it, he said, well, how can we help? I'm from Balfour Beatty and I work down at Hinkley Point C. I said, you'll have some sophisticated kit then for surveying the bridge. And have you all heard of LiDAR? That's light
Emitting
distance. The distance and range. It's a very clever camera arrangement that can work over 360 degrees to capture both visual images and LiDAR to build a cloud scan, a cloud point record of the position of every part of the bridge. Just amazing system. And so he brought along his very expensive piece of equipment and a couple of helpers, scanned the entire bridge from different points all the way around, and went away and produced this model, which you'll find on the website. Now, that's a very accurate model. This system works to within about 1 to 2 millimeters. Absolutely incredible. And of course, with this cloud of points, the computer software can go to any point and you can say, I want to start there and have a look at the bridge from anywhere. Or you can say, I'd like the bridge to turn. Now you notice he scanned the bridge with the roof on it, but they've digitally taken the roof off and they've put the deck boards on. You'd like to run this thing then? So he said, well, maybe we could just let us turn the bridge as well, see what it looks like, the bridge turning. Isn't that incredible? That's all from real data points and is to fantastic accuracy. And was produced for us free. And we even get a free Matthew ship.
I don't think the car and the ship were actually scanned, but
No,
the bridge is
that's
accurate.
CGI. I'm sorry to have overrun, David.
That's
Over
no
to you.
problem. Any quick questions when I change seats? Thanks, Geoff.
Well done.
Right, okay. What I'll do is we'll do some more questions at the end. Sorry, Geoff, can I steal that pen drive back again?
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll do questions at the end, deliberately so that we can see where we are in terms of time. And there's opportunity there for anybody to put questions in the chat. So if you've got a question that you've thought of that you would like to ask Geoff at the end, and you want to write it in the chat, do so now, because I can look that up later. So write it in the chat, and then we can look at those later. Meanwhile, what I would do, if I can make sure the leads are plugged back in, I will hopefully be able to share screen with you again. Let's see what you can see at the moment. You should be seeing. Right, okay. I'm going to stop the screen share for the moment. Okay. Not sharing screen. I need to see the PowerPoint presentation, which is on the pen drive. Right, okay. Now I need to share the screen. Share screen. Probably that one. Okay, let's go with nope. I knew I shouldn't have played the video. Okay, just give me a second. Back into settings, settings. Space settings. I should be able to swap screens. And you still people are. Oh dear. Sorry about this, people. These things are sent to try us. Just stop the share a second. Screen share. That one. Share. Okay, now at least everybody is seeing the same play from start. Excellent. Okay. I'll try and keep my voice as long as I can. This is sponsored by Menthols, Hall's Menthols, and extra strong mints, I think, tonight as well as some glasses of water. This is going to be a very short talk. It's again, I was quite happy for Geoff to carry on slightly longer than the half hour because I'm not got too much to talk to you about tonight. Pumping stations on the Severn Tunnel is what I've given it as its title. There's an S on the end of pumping stations, and this is a very nice picture that is available online. It's one of the Royal Commission of Wales, Historic Monuments of Wales, in their archive, and that's the bridge on the other side of the river. Do people know what the other side of the river, where that is? Does somebody know the name of the place? Sudbrook, that's right. So that is actually Sudbrook. It looks more like this now. Again, that's a nice little YouTube. I won't play that as a YouTube clip, but there's an aerial photograph that people have done on there. That's Sudbrook pumping station on the, I'm going to call it the Welsh side of the river. The reason why it's not actually the Welsh side is both sides are actually British, English. They're all of it's British, English. Wales starts a little bit further in. So technically speaking, the Severn Tunnel goes from England to England, but everybody refers to it as the Welsh side. So I'm going to refer to this as the Welsh side as well. You can see there's smoke coming out of the chimneys there. There's more than one chimney. There's a big building over on the left. I've got a pointer there. That big one is, if I go on to the next slide, this one here, that's that big building there. I believe that's the largest engine house ever built, which gives it some sort of significance. I'm going to rattle through the bit on the Sudbrook side quite deliberately because I really wanted to say what was there before. People know where the Severn Tunnel is. Of course, there's now the second Severn crossing, or they were going to call it one of the bridges. Somebody told me they were going to call one of the bridges the Prince of Wales Bridge, and the other one they were going to call the Prince Harry, so that because you've got one bridge and a spare. But I thought that was a little bit harsh. So moving rapidly on from that, there was always a case that you needed to get across the River Severn. There was a further Severn Bridge further up the railway bridge until it got hit in the in 1960s. Was it 50s, 60s? Yeah, when it got hit and by a barge and caught fire, etc. But before the tunnel was there, you had to go up and round. And of course, in the 1800s, this was very much a case of a long way around. The Bristol coalfield, which is one of my areas of expertise, of course, was very good at getting coal, and you could get your coal from there to London and places. Getting coal from Wales, South Wales, it had to go by ship because it was a nightmare to bring it anywhere else. Once the tunnel was there, of course, you could get coal straight from South Wales to anywhere in the world, really, because you could obviously come across and go down to Southampton docks. And when they first brought the tunnel through, I believe they did from the coal face to, I can't remember if it was Southampton or Portsmouth docks. They did a special run, and it was 7 hours from the coal face to the actual being on the ship. So that was the sort of the press release that they did at the time. So it was one of the things that killed off the Bristol coalfield, but the need to get that crossing there. Now, this is where it links to Geoff's talk, because it was always Brunel's vision that he would get people not from London to Bristol. You know, Bristol goes, oh, Brunel, Brunel, Brunel. But in fact, in Brunel's eyes, Bristol was a staging post. He was trying to get to New York. And to get to New York, the idea was that he would have ships, hence the SS Great Britain, the SS Great Eastern, etc., and the Western as well. But his real aim was to get across Wales, Milford Haven, and that area, Pembroke Dock, isn't it, right at the end, to have a ferry service from there with his steamship, so that you could literally go by Great Western Railway and Great Western Shipping all the way from London to New York. And the Severn Tunnel was part of that. It was Brunel's vision, but before the Severn Tunnel, because although he had plans for it, his vision for a Severn Tunnel never happened. They had this thing called the New Passage Pier and this Bristol and South Wales Union Railway ferry, and they were ferrying people across. So the railway trains came in. This is what's left of that. This is on the English side. The pier bit is still there, and the railway would carry on out into the sea. You'd get on your ship, you'd cross the Severn, get off, get back onto another railway train, and carry on across right the way through Wales. So before this happened, this is what New Passage looked like before. There were ferries going across, but it was just passenger ferries. This was called New Passage. Then, of course, Old Passage is further up the river, upstream at Aust, where subsequently there was a later railway car ferry going across to Chepstow, or near to Chepstow. But this is what it looked like beforehand. A very similar image from a bit later. So this would be about 1864, 1863, and it suddenly looked like that. If I compare the two again, go back one slide, and then you can see that they put this great big pier literally going out. And what's left is the stone part of that on the beach, and then it goes right out. And the train, you can see, actually went out on top of that. So it was a very strong pier, went right out into the sea, and then the ships would pull up on the outside. You get onto the ship and you'd go across. I've not done much research on this. Other people have. You can see there that I've crossed out January 1864. One of the references says that it opened in January 64. You will see it on that plaque that it says it opened in 1863, September 1863. One might be the date it actually opened. One might be the date it was first used. I'm not quite sure the details on there. But when it first opened, there were apparently no freight conditions. There was no provision for freight. It was a passenger thing at that time. Nice colour version of it for you as well. On the opposite side, if you go across to the Portskewett side, the Welsh side, there you see they had a very similar pier on that side. I've not been over there to see if anything's left of that. Somebody might be able to tell me. I'm not aware that there's anything left on that side at all. But again, you can see the actual train coming in there. So the boats would come in and then go on. And there's a colour version of that kicking around as well. Just in terms of other things on the website, this one's a little bit out of order. My apologies for that. There are various photographs of bits and pieces of the equipment that is in there, including a film. British Transport Films did a film about the Severn Tunnel and included a lot about the pumping that was going on there. But we'll come back to that. A lot of the stuff I've given you about that railway link comes from this website, greatwestern.org. So if you're interested in knowing a bit more about the railway side of things initially, go and have a look on this side. And this goes in to talk about the actual tunnel itself. Now, I'm not going to go into too much about the tunnel itself. I will do a little bit of an overview in the moment. But one of the nice images on there is this one. Again, stolen from the borrowed or used from the Royal Commission and Royal Commission and Archives, I think, of Historic Monuments of Wales. It's one of their images. Again, you Google it, you'll find that. And there are a series of nice black and white photos of the main pumping house on that side. So let's talk about why it was necessary. Well, once they started doing the tunnel, after, you know, the tunnel opened in 1883, I've got in my head. I think I've got it written down somewhere. So it wasn't long after this 1860s, 1863, 1864, when they started this ferry thing, that they said, we need to get on with the tunnel. So the plans were going through. Brunel had died, so he didn't move into here doing this. But is it Hawksworth who finished off? Hawkshaw, that's the name. The man who finished off the Clifton Suspension Bridge, he was the engineer for this one. So again, they started doing this. And if I show you this slide, you can see at the top, there's a map or a plan section. You can see the blue, of course, is the water. And as most railway tunnels under rivers, that goes down, 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 down. So they're cutting initially into a tunnel, it goes all the way down, and it starts coming up the other side. So as you're digging this, there's a need to actually pump some of the water out as it's being pumped. And of course, there's going to be natural seepage coming in, and there's going to be a pool in the bottom. So they knew they had to do some pumping anyway. The image at the bottom is a photograph of the current culvert that they've captured, what's called the Great Spring. There's a whole story here. I won't go into too much detail into it, but basically, whilst they were digging this thing, they broke into what's called the Great Spring, or the Big Spring on this picture. If you look over on the right hand side, you'll see that it says Big Spring. So they had pumping shafts. Sudbrook shafts were already there. They had various other shafts, the middle shaft, etc. They were pumping, and like most railway tunnels, you tend to have a shaft going down and you dig out in both directions, and they join together. You don't just start at one end and go all the way down. They would have had multiple shafts. Of course, you couldn't have multiple shafts in the middle bit because there's a river in the way. But on the approaches, they had these shafts, and it was actually the bit that was going down from the middle shaft that broke into it. And if you look on there, I'm not sure whether you can actually see that from sitting back there. So it does say 6,000 gallons. Check what it says myself. 6,000 gallons per minute. Yeah, not per hour, not per day, 6,000 gallons per minute. That's what they broke into. There's a whole story about how they called in a diver, and the diver went down and he closed one of the doors so they could actually lessen the water. And then the pumps were big enough to actually pump the water down enough so they could get and control it. But they quickly realized that this underground water source that they'd broken into was a significant problem. So they were going to have to do some serious pumping to get it out. And so, as well as the pumping engines that they'd already put in, a small one at Sudbrook, they decided to put in some massive great ones as well. Here's a little bit of a section showing the position that they were in when the Big Spring broke in. And you can see that they are going left and right from the shafts coming in. Hill Pit finally filled up, so they filled that one in. They've got the Marsh Pit, which it gets filled up as well. Sudbrook old pumping shaft, and then they broke into the Big Spring that broke in. That's 1879. So let's do a little bit on the pumping Sudbrook side of things before I move on to talk about the other side. Again, this is another photograph online. You'll see that it's it's actually from 2009, but it's a relatively modern aerial photograph. Someone sent a drone up and took some photos of things, and there's a whole series of these and some aerial photographs and video and things. Again, I won't show you the video, but fortunately, well, if you go into that building now, it's largely empty because, of course, the pumps are electric. But there are some images on the same site of the pumps that were in there before. There were 6 of them, and they were centered around the main shaft. And there's various ones there. Again, I'll show you these briefly because you can, of course, go and download these and look at them yourself online if you want to. And you can see this is obviously at the top level. Beams are that's the end. Then they're all pointing towards the shaft in the middle, and then there's ones down at the piston end, the cylinder end, as well. Some nice parallel motion going on there. And there's quite a few of these. There are other ones as well as the ones on the Royal Commission site. Other people who've gone out there and taken photos. Here's one from a site called Wonders of World Engineering, and there's some details about that. And there's other things. It's not just about the pumps there, because of course, being a tunnel, they needed some very large ventilation fans. So there's quite a bit of stuff on there about Sudbrook. So if you're interested, you can go and have a look at that. Now, one of the main sources that you could find, if you Google it, you'll find that there is a report of a visit that was made in 1959 by the Newcomen Society. Newcomen Society's summer visit was a visit to the Severn Tunnel pumping plant. And on it, it says, on Wednesday, 23rd of March, 1960, by permission of somebody they knew had a contact who knew the chief mechanical electrical engineer, they went and paid a visit to Sudbrook on the Monmouthshire entrance to the Severn Tunnel to see the Cornish beam engines and the Bull engine. There was a Bull engine. I think the Bull engine was in a separate building that for many years have kept the tunnels clear of water. It then finishes off by saying, but by 1962, will have been replaced by new pumps and electrically driven motors. So there's a whole thing, and there's lots of things about the sizes and the stroke and all the things that you would expect to have in a Newcomen Society report of a trip to a pumping station. It also says, visit to the Severn Tunnel pumping plant at Sudbrook, Monmouthshire. Oh, sorry, that's the quote. What about the other side? Well, in that same report, it also says, on the Gloucestershire side of the River Severn at Seawall, there is one pumping shaft, 15 foot in diameter by 100 foot deep. 2 beam engines drive the pumps there. They were seen during the summer meeting in 1959. So although there's goodness knows how many pages of write-up about the Sudbrook side, that is all it says. The Newcomen Society went there in 1959, and they reported that they went there. And unfortunately, nothing else is said about it. I'm not anticipating that anybody in this room went there in 1959 and said, oh, I've got some photographs, but hopefully somebody somewhere might have some more information. So let's just go back again. This was what I showed you, the diagram on the right-hand side of what they were doing. If I move you over onto the English side, you've got a thing called the salmon pool on the surface there. And you've got a thing called sea walls. Basically, they did some flood prevention. They built a wall. That's why it's called sea walls. And they put a pumping shaft on this side. Of course, you needed a pumping shaft because before the 2 tunnels had connected, the water was running into the tunnel on this side. So you needed to pump the water out anyway from this side. And the intention would have been to have a pumping engine on both sides to keep the water drained. Of course, they put in the massive great ones because of the Great Spring, because they found so much extra water. And this was the condition again at the same time when they broke through. You'll see that they were only about 130 yards away from joining this bit up at that time. Obviously, there was still some more work to do elsewhere on it, but they were getting quite close in 1879 to having this thing ready to go. And this is the seawall pumping shaft end. So this is the English side. I came across a reference to this that says at the eastern end too, water broke in through the roof of the heading. So it wasn't just flooding that they had from the Great Spring. This was coming in from the roof. Basically, there's a whole series of fault lines and splits. I've done some work on this for the, I published an article in the UBSS proceedings years ago about Otter Hole, which is a cave over near Chepstow, and the water that goes into that. I've also more recently done another thing about the geology of the North Bristol area, about where water goes and everything else. But the whole area is quite faulted, and you get these large split vertical slots going down. Some of them are filled with dinosaur bones. Other ones are, I've got caves. Some of them are just filled with water. And of course, if you've got a slot that goes quite a long way up, it's likely that if you're digging underneath, you're going to find out that slot goes all the way up to the River Severn. And all of a sudden, you've got water coming in on you. And that's what they did. The salmon pool, as that was referred to, an area where they used to catch salmon, they suddenly found that they were going underneath that and water was coming in. The water was found to be salty, showing that it had come from the estuary itself, so it was coming in from above. The leak was just traced to the tidal area known as the salmon pool. The hole was filled up with alternate layers of loose and bagged clay. Now, to find it, what they did is they've got a whole line of engineers or tunnel diggers. They got them to hold hands and walk out into the estuary. And when one disappeared, they found the hole. Quite literally, they said, right, that's it. They knew where it was. They came out with all these bags of stuff and just threw them in until they plugged it. Of course, once they'd gone underneath it, they could line underneath and make sure the water wasn't going to come in anymore. But literally, that's how they solved that problem. I should also say that Mr. Lambert, who was the diver who went in on the other side, he first went in with a large helmet, you know, the big brass helmets and the big heavy shoes, and walked in. Of course, he had an air hose. And of course, when the water broke in, it brought in all the propping and tubs and all sorts of stuff everywhere. So he was trying to work his way through these. And of course, he had this great big air hose, and people were sort of passing it in, and he couldn't get it to go around all the corners. So the first attempt, he didn't get there. But there was somebody else who'd developed a bottle of air that would go on your back. Of course, we all know about scuba divers and things, but this was the first time that somebody said, "Oh, I've got this," and he said, "Well, I'll try it out." He went in and came back out and goes, "No, I'm not doing that. It's far too dangerous." So after a couple of training sessions, our diver friend, Mr. Lambert, went back in using the new first bottle on the back technique, and he went in and was able to do it with that. So it's got, from a diving point of view, and underground diving and cave diving and all sorts of things, it's really quite a significant thing. Like I say, on the other side, the technique was to see when a man fell down a hole, but there we go. That's on this side as well. I've put this in because when they put the railway across, they also put in a hotel, New Passage Hotel. Excuse me. And this was run, it's not there now. There's a couple of new houses on the site of where it was, but there was a hotel there. It was, quite popular for people to go to. The actual owner of the hotel, Oliver Norris, his name appears as the guy who was in charge of the sinking of the shaft at Sudbrook as well. So he was a local contractor. So that name comes in. So I'm not sure whether the hotel was a side thing that he did, or whether he had lots of fingers in lots of pies. Again, there's a lot more research about sinking of the shaft on this side. But for those of you who know the area, they'll know that what I'm referring to as New Passage is effectively Severn Beach. Severn Beach sounds lovely, doesn't it? And it used to have a marina and a little park and little boating lake and all sorts of things. And it was a place where people used to go on holiday. I've heard it referred to as Southmead-on-Sea, which is again possibly a little bit harsh, but you can see that it was a place where people would go. But the reason for showing this is not to show you a Victorian holiday destination. It's just up the road from Clevedon and Weston-super-Mare. It's nothing like Clevedon and Weston-super-Mare. That's about as good as the beach gets. It's shingly, and then when the tide goes out, it's just mud. But if you see in the background, there's a pumping station, and recently a set of these sort of came. My birthday was in January, and people said, "Well, what can we get you for your birthday?" And, "Oh, can we get you a book on mining?" And, "Well, I've got all the ones I really need." And, "Oh, can we get you something?" And it's a case of I'm one of those people who's quite difficult to buy for, and I said, "Well, actually, I wouldn't mind this set of images." And I've got them here on the table in front of me. There's a couple more as well that I haven't brought in. But it was a case of, well, actually, I don't know of anybody who's done anything about that. It's not an area that I'm particularly researching. Most of the stuff that I'm researching is 100 years, if not 150 years older than this particular site. It's a case of, well, yeah, just get me those postcards, that'll be nice. And there's a whole series of them. That's quite a long way away, of course. But if you go around on the other side, this is quite a nice one. This isn't actually the postcard. This is one that I've taken from on site, and you can see the pumping engine in the house there. There's a Punch and Judy show going on down there on the bit of grass, and there's people with their hats on, and there's several from this sort of angle. This is the same sort of angle, but without all the people in front, and you can see the pair of beams sticking out from the beam engines. I've also got two which are of the pumping station itself from a quite close-ups, that's a bit fuzzy on the screen, but it's actually quite nice. And I've got two very similar ones from that side. And it's a case of, what a shame that there aren't any from the other side. And then I was lucky enough to be able to get hold of this one, which is clearly from the other side. And this is the sidings coming up because, of course, the pumping station needed its coal. By this time, the actual cutting has gone down quite low. So this is sort of a branch line that comes off of the main thing. If you zoom in on that, you can see that the pumping station is quite nicely displayed. So what happened to the pumping station? Because if you go there now, there's a sort of a fenced off area and a little capped area, because of course there was a shaft. The shaft does still go down, and you can hear the trains going by underneath. It's still a ventilation shaft for the actual railway tunnel, as far as I know. But as it said in the Newcomen proceedings, it was 1962 that they electrified it. And this little article came in as well about how they changed from the pumps you can see up on the right-hand side to the very high tech of the time pumping system, all controlled by computers, or the nearest thing that they had in that time. That's a nice little article that oh, I've got it here. It's here. If you want to have a look at it, you can. But this was in the Railway Magazine of January 1962. So that's one of the things that I sort of came across in this. No mentions of the other side at all, by the way. But it was the same time that they got rid of both sets of pumps. This article here, this little pamphlet, I saw on eBay and thought, oh, since I've got the photographs, I ought to buy this to go with the photographs. And it's a pamphlet about the Severn Tunnel and its pumping engines with an S on the end. So about the engines. And lo and behold, you know, it's got the Severn Tunnel and its pumping engines, extracts of the transactions of 1951 of who? Of the Swindon Engineering Society. And again, obviously, somebody had been getting some information off because Swindon and the railway, it's all quite interesting. And on this one, if you actually start reading it through, in the introduction, it tells you what's in there, and it says that there's a description of all the details in there of how it worked. We start off with the history, tell you all about Mr. Lambert and the engineer, Mr. Walker, and how it was all done. And then it comes down to talk about the pumps themselves. And it says references made to the history of the ventilating system with a description of the present engines and the fan as well, because of course there was an engine to drive the fan. And then some details of the subsidiary pump house at 5 miles, 4 chains and seawall on the Gloucester side are dealt with. And then finally some facts and figures, etc., etc. I challenge anybody to go through that document and find anything to do with seawalls. It jumps straight from ventilations to the facts and figures. They seem to have completely forgotten to put in anything about seawalls. On the seawall side, the new passage side. So unfortunately, there's nothing in that one either. So we've got, like I say, loads of pictures here, some extra ones. Not loads, but there's quite a few pictures of this wonderful pumping head station on the Welsh side. Again, lots of details there as well. I will read this one out because if you go there now, I probably should have put in a picture of what it looks like now, which is just an empty building. It says there were some terrible industrial heritage decisions made in the name of progress in the early 1960s. Now, people have to be aware that 1960s was also the time when anything to do with steam was not what British Rail wanted to talk about. And these were driven by steam. So it was a case of, no, they must go, they're steam. We don't do steam anymore. So British Rail weren't interested in them. One was to scrap the beam engines that had pumped out the Severn Tunnel since 1886 to be replaced by electric pumps. 1886, there you go, there's the date. I knew it was somewhere in the mid-1880s. What would it have taken to build a new building for the electric pumps and keep these magnificent engines? One of the beams was rescued and could be found in the garden of Swansea Museum, but in no context. So basically, I think, and I know Paul Stevens, chairman of the International Stationary Steam Engine Society, says, had it happened 5 years later, maybe 10 years later, they would have probably survived. Had they been on this side of the river, I know the one I'm talking about is on this side of the river, perhaps, you know, people like Angus Buchanan and George Watkins and other people would have said, oh, let's save them. I know some people did try to say they really ought to be saved, but it wasn't what British Rail wanted. However, one was saved. That's what's left. Now, if I finish off my bit of the talk by linking back to our first talk, that is preserved, and it's good that it's preserved, but it's preserved out of context in a museum scenario. Now, that's the same argument with Brunel's Bridge. It's great that it would have been preserved had it gone to the SS Great Britain Trust. You know, there's the argument that says they've got the money to restore it, they've got the money to repair it. Nobody spoke up to say, actually, it would be better if this stayed in situ. But of course, these would only stay in situ if you had access to them and people could see them. And the problem with these is even now, people can't go in and see, because British Rail still use it. It's an active working place. Network Rail, you'd have to get permission from them and everything else. I've never been in Sudbrook. I know one or two people who have, but apparently it's very difficult. It would be wonderful to do a joint bias and Newcomen trip to go there, but it would be very difficult to arrange that. But you can go and see this one. Anybody can go and see this one. But how is it displayed? Is it displayed as well as it could be? So the same arguments that happened or that have been going on recently regarding Brunel's Bridge. Is it best it stays where it is? Is it better that it moves? Combined with the fact that, well, if it stayed, the ultimate is to stay where it is, but only if it can be repaired where it is and the public have access to it. That needs money. This would have needed money. It's costing nothing there, but apart from the occasional coat of paint. So this is where we are with heritage these days. Very much so that it's a question of, wouldn't it be nice if, but are there enough people putting up a voice to say, no, it would be better if we did this? And are there enough people claiming, can we get some money towards this as well? And if you do put enough people together, are there people who are actually going to listen and come up with the funds as well? So that's very briefly linked the two together. And that ultimately ends what I was going to say. And that gives us another 5 minutes till 9 o'clock. So that does give us a chance for a few questions. So Geoff, if you want to come back as well. There's a question over there.
It's more of a comment that there are bits of the full engine, from the full engine to the National Green Wales.
Oh, right, okay. Okay.
I don't know, but certainly a cylinder.
Okay, I wasn't nope, I'm trying to end I was just about to end the meeting by I don't want to do that. What can we see? Oh, we're back online. Yes, the comment there was the comment for those people who didn't hear that is that parts of the Bull engine are in Swansea Museum. National Museum. In this, okay. Again, there's plenty of engines and things that are in store which no one can see to. So
Sitting around in the ground.
Okay. All right. Okay. I wasn't aware of that, but like I say, it's not exactly my area of expertise. It was a nice short talk for the other half of the night, but I'm getting more interested into it, and I've got some postcards as well. Any other questions in the room for me or Geoff? Fine. Anybody online got a question? I've got a note here that says there's a couple of questions on the chat. Oh, sorry, I should have muted one of the. I thought I did mute the. Bit later, answer that one. No, that's. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure why there's a bit of feedback. That one is on mute. I hope the feedback wasn't too bad. Query for Geoff Wallis. Geoff, have Mann Williams' model of the structure allowed you to identify the extent of repair work needed to bring the Swivel Bridge back into use for pedestrian and cycle use, presumably?
Thanks for the question. The short answer is no, not yet, but it will be by April. Hopefully, they're making very good progress. There's good correlation between the experimental work and the theoretical modelling. So they're confident of being able to do that. What they have discovered so far is that the two side spans are already strong enough to take pedestrian and cyclist loads. That's without any repairs. What they're worried about is the central structure where the corrosion is far worse and the stress is higher, of course. So it looks as if what's going to be required there is for the bridge to be propped and the whole of the central structure dismantled, taken away, repaired, brought back again, and presumably riveted back in place. Quite an operation, but it's in some respects easier to do that than to deal with 70 foot long pre-tensioned rods inside a wrought iron tube, 2 wrought iron tubes.
Of course, you can't get in the tubes or anything. They're not big enough to.
And being in tension, if those side members were separated from the cross bracing, there would be a danger the whole thing would fold up. It would just go unstable, collapse.
There's another question online for me. Is the water being pumped from the tunnel usable? The answer is yes. It's pure, very pure spring water. It gets pumped in the Welsh direction up near the service station. Magor service station is the first one. There's a plant there. It used to be making Heineken. So the thing that refreshes the parts other beers cannot reach is what comes out from the Severn Tunnel. So yes. So it is used. I believe they're still using it for something. I don't think it's used for Heineken now, but it's used for some purposes. Okay, there's no more questions online unless anybody else has a quick one. Nothing coming through. Any questions in the room? There's one more in the room.
You were saying earlier, Geoff, that you thought that the tensioning on one side wasn't, and on the other side is. Will it be possible to retension the other side, or is that rather?
That's a very good question. I think the first question is, will it be necessary? If not, then we shan't do anything because it's too difficult, frankly.
Would you detension the?
No, definitely not. No, we wouldn't detension the side that is tensioned because it's very rigid now. There's hardly any flexibility. We knew about this problem because when we started jacking the tail end up, one side went up nicely and the other side simply didn't move because all we were doing is bending or possibly straightening out the beam. It was only after 65 millimeters, it was 2.5 inches of movement at the tail end that the rest of the bridge started moving. It was just bending before that. In theory, it's possible still to get at the wedges that secure the tie rods, but in practical terms, it would be extremely difficult.
But does it mean that if you get it up on its turntable and all ready to go and get it back ready for use, does it mean it'll have some sort of twist in it?
Yes, but a modest one, so probably not noticeable.
There's another question in the room.
Sort of Severn Tunnel observations.
Yeah.
Firstly, I was reading apparatus used in that heroic valve closing.
Yeah.
It was not a bottled gas one. It was actually a very early example of what's called a rebreather.
Yes.
Yes. Very technical.
Yes. No, you're right.
Absolutely.
You're right.
And a couple of things about Severn Tunnel pumping engines. There exists in either the National Records Office or the Science Museum Library, I'm not too sure which, there may be two copies, a volume of colour photographs taken of all the Severn Tunnel pumping stations before they were electrified, including quite a lot of pictures of the one that's
Okay,
on the
that's
English
interesting.
side. And finally, the English side engines were roughly the same size as the surviving Cornish type engines at Crofton.
Right.
That's technically kind of a little bigger in the stroke, but roughly that sort of size
Yeah.
engine.
I'll just repeat that for people who are online because they wouldn't have heard that. There were 3 points. The first one was that the diving gear was a rebreather type. There's a whole story about diving technology and everything else. Yes, when you go diving, particularly cave diving, you're not actually breathing oxygen. You are actually breathing in, breathing out, and it depends whether it's a closed system or an open system is the point. Whereas you're breathing in and your bubbles are going up, or whether your air is going back into the cylinder and being scrubbed effectively and taking some of the carbon dioxide out so that you can actually then breathe it back in again. So it's a rebreather system. That was the system that and I've forgotten the name of the guy who invented it, but it was Lambert was the guy who used it, but I can't remember the name. Yeah, there's loads of stuff that you can find out about that. That was the first point. The second point was that there are some color photographs of the pumping engines from the Severn Tunnel before they were taken out in Science Museum. Did you say? Okay. So Okay, so there are photos somewhere. I did do quite a good, like I say, this was a case, so let's do a quick talk and see if anybody else knows. And so I'm glad you've said that. I couldn't find those, but I will have another look now and see what's there. But in terms of published material, there's very little, if anything, on. There's quite a bit on Sudbrook, but not on Seawall's new passage. And then the third point was that the Seawall's engines are very similar in size, or were very similar in size, to the Crofton engines, ones that still survive. Okay, any more questions? Because it's just got to 9 o'clock, so I've got quick one if anybody's got anything. No? In that case, thank you all for coming. I will close the meeting online. Good to see you all online. Like I said, it was a bit of a hybrid tonight, but that was the intention. If you want to know any more about either of those, I'm sure you can get in touch with either Geoff or myself. That's not a problem through various channels, either through Bias or Newcomen Society. Good to see you all online, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one, which
I've got a question.
is in 4 weeks' time, and it is...
Fred Star on Guest Urban.
Yeah, Fred Star. This is the next. There's other Newcomen Society meetings. There's other Bias talks as well. But the next one from here is Fred Star on early gas turbines. Correct. Lovely to see you all. I will close the meeting and hope to see you in 4 weeks' time. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody.